now. Bomb. It's me. I'm back, everyone. Hello. Sorry for the 5 minutes or so delay there. My internet took the classic crap on me, and that's what's going on. That's the life. That's the life. So, thank you so much for your patience. I appreciate it. I appreciate your attendance, and I am excited to talk about today's session. So, for those of you who are new to Disorganized Play, every Tuesday, I stream an hour talking about how I'm going to prepare this week's adventure. Then on Wednesday, I sit down and play this week's adventure, Tales from the Yawning Portal. Well, actually, this is how much I prepped, guys. I have the book with me. And then on Thursdays, I do a recap talking about what happened and what I thought and what I can take away from it, lessons learned, how things went differently, because they always do, etc., etc., etc. And you guys, in previous seasons, had to patiently sit and listen as I explained the events of the previous session. But now, starting with Ironkeep Chronicles, you can actually watch the session. So I hope many of you tuned in. If you have not caught up, it is available on the VOD. So that's cool. And I really had a great time last night. So I believe in the chat here today with me is Mr. Gaurav Galati, Mr. Double XG. Let's just find out. So we don't have the capability to have Gaurav sit in on this session either as a voice on Discord or to Skype in or anything like that. He is here in the chat with us. He's sneaking it in at work. So I thought it would be nice, though, to have one of the players actually join for a little discussion about how the game went and what they thought of it and what was surprising and new and different. Kind of get both sides of the screen of the perspective. And then I'm going to kick him out and talk about threads to watch, things to do. We'll have a little time for Q&A. Specifically, I'd like to have Q&A about the game that we ran last night. But if you have other questions, that's fine. So the good news is, because I don't have to do a big 20 to 30 to 40 minute recap of the events that took place last night, we can get right to the heart of what was different, what struck me, what changed, what implications there are for future adventures for next week, etc. So hopefully this will save us a ton of time. We can get more, deal more directly with the business of dungeon mastery. So, yes, Gaurav, just let us know if you do have to punch the clock here. That's absolutely understandable. I have plenty of stuff that I can chat about. So let's take a look at what's on our agenda for today. So we're going to talk about character bonds, how those played out. We're going to talk about competency. That is sort of related to the choice to hack John Harper's Wildlings and play a version of the game that I call Beastlings. We're going to talk about threads to watch, things that were established in last night's Session 0 character building game that could potentially bear fruit either next week or down the line. And then we'll have a little to-do list of things that I need to think about in order to prep next week's session. And finally, if there's any kind of cleanup in terms of Q&A, things that are dangling loose questions, burning questions that you guys have about how the session went or how I put things together or whatever, we can address that in the Q&A. But first of all, I'd like to just sort of keep Gaurav's time, keep the use of his time as efficient and economical as possible. So, Gaurav, why don't I guess if you could just share with us a little bit of what you were expecting. So a couple things. What you were expecting, when we talked about the campaign coming together, the fact that these are the players, this was the party, I was going to DM, this is what we're going to play, what your expectations were at that point, then what your expectations were when you found out I was doing a Session 0, and then maybe what came out after the session or during the session that you're like, oh, that's different than what I thought it was going to be. And it could be either cooler or it could be, something that you're like, that didn't really click for me or whatever. I'm happy to hear, your perspective in terms of if you found something disappointing or that just didn't quite work for you or whatever. Like, I'm happy to entertain that too. So that's what's going on. So Garav's, punch those answers in. You can be short and to the point, and kind of, you don't have to type a big paragraph. So there you go. So that let's start there. I will say, from my perspective, I've been excited about this show for a while, especially because it's been frustrating for me to do so much work on Storm King's Thunder and not be able to share the actual play experience with you viewers in the chat at home on Twitch and whatnot. So that was difficult. That was difficult for me as I did it, and I did it for 6 months, and so I was really pumped to get this rolling. I have concerns personally about the number of dungeon crawls it is, about the variety of adventure and structure and things like that. So that's something that I will have to watch and maintain an eye on as we go through the campaign. But I was super pumped to do this Session 0 Wildlings, Beastlings format, and I think it paid off. From my perspective, it really paid off. So Grav says, I was expecting, we players had talked about how we wanted relationships to matter big time, and using bonds from Dungeon World did just that, and we found some great connections between us. I enjoyed that part. And BSB cares. It was amazing how the bonds really played out in Session 0. Oftentimes, it takes some time for the Dungeon World bonds to really come out on the table in some of the streams that we've seen it used on. And I will agree with that. When I used some Dungeon World bonds in Storm King's Thunder, and there's something that really can get people get their hooks into for one session, and then it just sort of disappears and people forget about it. Especially if you don't revisit it, and if there's not a mechanical reason to hook it back into what's going on. So that's it's a great way to initialize character relationships, initiate character relationships, but it's also a very easy way, something that's very easily dropped as you just sort of get more involved in the plot and some other things that are established about the characters. As the characters get more fleshed out, then people kind of they shelve that stuff and they're like, oh yeah, I dealt with that. I don't really remember. So, Gaurav says, I was a bit tough moving things along last night because some of us got real caught up in those connections, and that's why we ended up taking a long time getting to the actual keep. My character felt like the odd man out because I kept trying to keep the wheels going, but there was a bit too much infighting for me. Hopefully our characters growing older together makes us a better and more cohesive party. I mean, I think that's... So, I don't know that... I don't know that that's the fault of the Dungeon World bonds. Let me say that. I do think there is an easy decision when you say I want to have a relationship with another character, that there's a pitfall that you can easily fall into, is that I'm going to have a combative relationship, right? Like it seems like a lower stakes choice to be someone's best friend, or to just be a friend with them, or to be a work associate. And that's sort of true, but there's different types of relationships. And I think there's a little bit of a pitfall of let's create an adversarial relationship, because that's a strong relationship that you know how to play hard. But the issue with that is when you play a strong conflict relationship, what that means is you're often negating action and progress. You're negating the arc of the plot, because in your relationship, to play your relationship, you want to initiate conflict. You want to fight with that character and tell them that they're wrong, or they did something wrong, or let's not do that, or I don't want that because you want that. I mean, that's a very That's a very easy trap to fall into. And I think that's, there may be an element of that in the group. I also think one of the issues that we're going to kind of touch on, and maybe we can touch on that now, even though it's not in the order of what we're talking about. One of the issues is when you're a D&D character, you are largely competent, right? Like you succeed, I don't know, probably 60 to 70% of the time, right? And in this system, you are largely incompetent. You fail 50% of the time. And unlike in D&D, so here's the thing. Here's how D&D is rigged in favor of competency for the characters. Is, let's just say it's the same thing as most of the competency in wildlings/beastlings, right? So let's say you have a +2 to hit, and you just mostly need to hit armor class 12 or 13. You're gonna hit 50% of the time, right? So 50% of the time you're gonna hit, but 50% of the time you're gonna fail. On its face, that looks like the same odds as in wildlings. Right? In wildlings, if you have a D6 in something and you roll a D6, 4 or higher means you succeed at that thing with one outcome, and a 3 or lower means you fail. But here's where that's a false comparison, because in D&D, success is largely, it's not pass-fail, it's pass-nothing, right? So when you attack with your sword, either you hit or you miss, but there is no consequence for when you miss, right? So you're actually sort of buffered from bad things happening to you when you roll the dice. In wildlings, you either hit, or succeed, or something bad happens to you. And that means the stakes get higher, or your character is directly impacted, or you do something bad, you essentially fumble what's happening. So it's different than D&D, where D&D is succeed or void is essentially what kind of the result set is, versus truly like a pass-fail, where the situation in Beastlings either gets better or it gets worse. In D&D, it either gets better or nothing has happened, you've wasted your turn. So the consequence definitely is when the enemy attacks back. But here's the issue with that, right? I have 4 players sitting at the table, and then I have whatever number of monsters is attacking them. Let's just say 2. In wildlings, that's 4 opportunities for people to make the situation definitively worse. In D&D, there's two monsters, and they might still miss. So there's only 2 chances to make the situation worse, and those are still kind of binary pass-void situations, right? So keep that in mind, that it's not quite the same set of, it's not quite the same balancing act, especially if you start to go into kind of like the boss monster scenario, where maybe you have one guy who hits really hard, but he's only going to hit one character really hard. Whereas in like wildlings, if you have 4 characters and they all fail, or 3 of them fail, that's 3 times worse than having a boss monster in D&D hit somebody really hard. So keep that, in mind. It's a different level of balance, and it deliberately, I deliberately introduced them into a situation or a system that had low competency and a great amount of failure. So, Grop says, I feel like I didn't make any strong character choices other than having an accent, which I didn't really get to explain either. I mean, that's what Session 0 is for, right? It's kind of feeling your way around the character. I don't expect people to sit down at the table and have a fully formed idea of who their character is, what they're all about, what they sound like. Like I often will start a character with one accent and then kind of get tired of it. And get tired of having to do it and wish that I had made maybe a different choice, or just it sort of just fades off, like I kind of drop it altogether. So yeah, I understand that feeling of like, I wish that my character, Amy very clearly came in with a super strong idea of who she wanted to play. I think Eric had a strong idea as well, but he didn't have the same situation. He didn't have the same kind of. I really want to kind of say he didn't have the same need to play that thing out. He was thinking of playing a fighter. Well, you don't actually have to actively try to fight because those opportunities to fight are gonna naturally pop up, right? Whereas Amy was, she was set on like, I want to make this character a warlock type of character, and I want to, deal with possibly malevolent forces or whatever. So I need to manifest magical abilities and try to reach out or embrace some sort of whatever mysterious power is going to grant these things. So, boy, so that means that her character, I think, she was pressing the character concept that she walked in with a lot harder than I think anyone else at the table. Not for good or for bad, but that's just the way that played out. And I think in comparison, everyone else was sort of finding their way around the character a little bit more. Graf says, could you describe my character in 3 words based on last night's session? What would they be? Well, I think, I don't know if I can, I'm not going to try and skinny it down into 3 specific words. I'll just kind of spitball here and see if you agree with my assessment. So here was what I thought. You were trying to do the right thing. That was definitely one of your character hallmarks. Is like, I'm the guy who's trying to do the right thing. Why are we stealing this stuff? Come on, let's get these guys out of the building. Like, you were that person who had good intentions. I think, the flip side of that was also your intentions maybe exceeded your reach, so to speak, right? There was definitely like a lot of, and this happened throughout the group, and it was by design. There's definitely a lot of failing. So I don't know that a character trait of yours is incompetence, but maybe you have, that eyes is bigger than your stomach kind of syndrome, where you have loftier goals than what you can actually accomplish. So maybe you're ambitious, but in a well-intentioned way. So that's something. And then finally, I definitely pulled like from the bonds that the idea that your character is protective of the other characters, especially of Avril and also similarly of Tack, right? So you're the guy who's actively trying to protect them and help them, as opposed to Grayson, Eric's character, who is more kind of like quietly competent. Eric is also playing towards a paladin type character, but he wasn't like 100% sure on whether he was going to go full paladin or be like the guy who's wants to be a holy warrior, but just hasn't been like blessed by the gods and given that sort of mission. So we'll see what happens. So those are that's my quick assessment. Would you agree, Gaurav, that those are sort of the, yeah. So that thing. What class does that define? I don't, I mean, that could also honestly be a paladin or a paladin wannabe. I don't know, I'm not going to run this game strictly by Adventurers League rules, so I've thrown it open. Like, if the players want to play something from Unearthed Arcana or whatever, they're certainly welcome to do that, or we will take an existing character class and tweak it and play something different. So, one thing that Gaurav was also going towards was anti-magic. I didn't like magic at all. And that's difficult, right? The tricky part of that is all of the magic that was introduced last night was, if not explicitly malevolent, at least implicitly sinister, right? So, of course, you had the curse that had descended upon the village. That was very clearly something evil. That was bad magic. And then it turns out that whatever this tall, kind of reptilian creature was weaving this silver rune thing, like whatever that was all about, was clearly bad, with the snow that had the paralyzing runes in it and all that kind of thing, right? So that was bad. And then on top of it, all of Amy's invocations of magic ended up being deliberate, and this was deliberate on my part, but dark and mysterious and creepy, and they definitely had a tinge of maliciousness or evil to them, right? So that's something to keep in mind. Is that there was no good model of magic. There was no friendly sorcerer who was like, I shall protect you with my arcane powers. There was none of that kind of stuff. On the other hand, maybe that, as BSB Care points out, that might actually make sense to like point your character away from magic. I guess my question with the anti-magic thing for you, Gaurav, would be, where is that? How do you anticipate that playing out? It's not at this point explicitly a character about hunting, bounty hunting magic users or something like that. So do you see that just as a kind of a personal vendetta? I mean, it also begs the question, is it going to pull you into conflict with Amy's character if she keeps continuing the pursuit of magic, right? Hey, Havana's here too. So Havana, I'm curious about your, so I asked Gaurav this earlier, and I'd like to hear what you think. I'm curious about what your expectations kind of were when you first heard, like, hey, this is our party, and this is what we're gonna play, and I'll be DMing. So just like once the idea of this season's show kind of formed, what were your expectations initially? And then to hone in a little further, what were your expectations when I said, oh, we're going to play a Session 0 character building session? And then how did it play out differently? What did you learn? Or what was enlightening for you from the session last night? Or what was not, just didn't quite work for you? You didn't quite like zone in on that wasn't a thing that like it had higher expectations for something that didn't quite pan out the way that you thought it was going to pan out. So I'll let you you can answer those things in chunks. You don't have to write a page-long essay. But I am curious about your expectations. Kind of like, oh, okay, I have this idea for this D&D character in this campaign that we're going to play, and then like specifically, oh, okay, well now that we're going into the Session 0, here's what maybe it'll be like this, and then finally, like, what was it actually like? So. So Gaurav says, a mage hunter of sorts was my original idea. Isn't it Raceland's brother? Is it Tanis? James V says Cameron. So Gaurav says, I don't want to conflict with members of my party. Maybe I don't like magic when it's used to hurt other people. So yeah, that's also possible. Like you may have. Yeah, you may have a particular, you may be particularly offended when people use magic in malicious ways. How does that play out with, I don't know, I mean, I don't think there's necessarily something wrong with being, I want to say kind of bigoted against magic users. That's certainly something that you can play around with, but, let me think about how the mage, if it was a different campaign where we were like fighting the Red Wizards or something like that, I think that mage hunter idea could very clearly come to the fore. I don't know. It's a power that you don't understand, that you don't like. So let's think about that. DJ Regular says, I've been in games where one player's character was pretty hardline about playing their character to the point that it became difficult to navigate. I think you need to, that's something that you need to like talk to the player about. Like, okay, your character really is not, it's a problem that comes up in improv a lot, where somebody's playing their character and their character's in conflict with everybody else and kills the action. They negate everything that's happening. I think, come and help me with the dishes. I won't help you with the dishes. The dishes are stupid. I don't want to do any of it. Like, And that kind of conflict can be fine as long as the relationships within the scene keep developing. But in a D&D game, you need to actually engage in the action. Also, that sort of stuff needs to kind of move on to, like, if it's going to be expressed that way, it needs to be expressed in different areas and things like that. So I think it's one of those situations where you have to sit down with the player, kind of like doing a little aside, and go, I know you're playing your character like super hardcore, and this is how you see this person, and they're very black and white about how this is supposed to happen, but I need you, for the sake of the group, like, it's you're roadblocking the rest of the action at the table, and so I need you, for the sake of the group, to either, I mean, if you really can't find a way, retire the character, or find a moment of enlightenment or a moment of understanding where your character can see things differently and at least go, well, you guys are going to make me regret this, but here we go. So that's something you have to have a frank discussion with your players about that, because there shouldn't be one person who is constantly roadblocking the action of the rest of the party. That's unfair to the rest of the group. And I think it's okay to say that. Like, it's okay to tell them, like, I understand you have a very strong character concept, and that's fine, and that would be acceptable in a movie or a book where you're the only person who's involved. But I have 4 other players here who all also want to play the game, and they're, whatever reason, their moral code or their take on the situation is not as rigid. And so I need you to cooperate, because you're stealing game time from them, and you're stealing spotlight and focus. And it's not fair to the rest of the table for your character to have such an outsized impact on whether you guys go on the adventure or not, whether you go into that next room, how you deal with whatever. And I think it's okay for characters to have differences and to have relationships that develop and evolve, but it has to be, like, the group needs to be able to move forward. That's important. The group needs to be able to engage with the premise and execute action. And if your character's concept is too strong and either denies the premise or cancels the action, then you're sacrificing the fun of the group for your particular way that you want to play your character. So, Grav says, I'll probably simplify it to that I don't like sorcerer-type magic, since that's what the guy with the runes last night. So, I think, question mark. Yeah, let's noodle on this some more. Let's see if we can, I think between you and I, we may be able to come up with some sort of compromise or engagement. I almost wonder if we don't flip it on its ear. If your character doesn't become some sort of martial type of character, some sort of fighter or tank type of character who employs magic, but just for fighting. You don't like magic for other stuff. That's weird and ooky. I don't want to summon a wall of flame. I don't want to be able to shoot a lightning bolt out 300 feet. But I do want, whatever it is, an eldritch blade, or maybe you could play a mystic type of character, because the mystic class that they've proposed has some like a tanky variant on that. And that's something that you could think about, that maybe he sees a different way, like he sees a different way to use magic, and his philosophy is this is the right way to use magic, and what you guys are doing is the wrong way. I know you've been inclined to play a monk. I think the monk, you might find it a little one-dimensional, as we talked about the other night, where it's like, well, you run up front and you hit stuff, but do you have any other juice? I did have a monk in the Storm King's Thunder campaign, and they were able to do a bunch of stealth rolls and sneak around and shadow step and things like that. And so they were incredibly mobile on the battlefield, and they tended to tank and stun stuff. But it was sort of like a two-trick pony of like, okay, I can move really fast, and I can get up in somebody's face, and hopefully I can stun them, but I don't have a lot of other depth to my character. So that's something. And as Havana points out, 8 years is a really long time. Like, you could have a change of heart about magic. You could have a different experience. That's one of the reasons we're going to do that 8-year time jump, is so that you have the room to develop a character concept that you're more engaged with playing than what you came in with. Havana says, I loved not having any preconceived notions before going into last night, and it made it feel very organic. I agree. Like, I really enjoyed the organic nature of discovering the characters, discovering the relationships between the characters. The Dungeon World bonds really, as I anticipated, inspired so much more than what's actually on the page when you just look at that page of Dungeon World bonds. So that's something that I'm always amazed with. I really enjoy having people. I enjoy having people fill them out, but what I really enjoy is having them discover the connections. You can watch them, like, those moments of inspirations literally fire off as they go around the table and they go, oh, okay, this is perfect. You know, when you see that kind of eureka moment happen at the table, and it generally happens for everybody who's involved at different ways at different times as they put the pieces together, that's super fun. And whether they make like an on-the-nose choice of like, my parents are dead, or they make a choice that's different, that's like, I've sworn to protect you even though you live with him. Like, either way, it really works out, and it's really inspiring. Amy's here. Amy's also here. Yeah, it's a big party here in Disorganized Play. I'm glad to have everybody, well, most everybody here, I'm sure. I think Eric might be taking a nap because he has to work late tonight. Amy, I have a... Oh, I see. Oh, okay, I'm not listening. Amy adopted a new dog, for those of you who did not check. Let me punch this into chat so that I can ask you these questions since you're not technically listening. So Amy says, my expectations going into the campaign is that I would get my way all the time, as evidenced by her just blatantly looking at my little scene inspiration cards right in the middle of the game. Yes, we're well aware of the way the way it was. My expectations in last night's session were that I would get my way all the time. All right, well, those things are very clear. We know what type of player Amy is. I guess I will just have to change my DM style to suit Amy's needs. So that's it. All right. So Havana says, I'm not sure if I remember all the questions, but I tried really hard not to have any expectations going into last night's session. You really sold it as an inspiration / character building activity, and so I want to leave that totally open. Feel out with the other players at the table we're thinking and try and fit in my little puzzle piece so that I could help the team as a whole, but also provide an interesting dynamic. Vanna says, I definitely wanted to be more of a team player than I was in the last campaign. Although Avril ended up being pretty abrasive, I'm envisioning growing up a lot over the next 8 years and getting a better handle on her emotions and abandonment issues. She's going to be focused more on charming the pants off of everyone so that they never see it coming when that flash of her devious nature comes out and strikes. So, there we go. Amy, if I'm on mute, then how do you know that's right, Tom? Because I didn't type that into our little thing. So, yeah, I think we have the opportunity here. You know, what I like about doing a session 0 and doing it as a prequel is nothing set in stone. So if you want to take your character in a totally different direction, you have the opportunity to do that. But I thought overall it was a really successful. It was a successful. It did what it was supposed to do, right? It got the drama going, and I don't mean that necessarily in a bad way, but you were put into a pressure cooker of a scenario, and then you got in over your heads, and you reacted as teenagers would react to that situation. So that's what that's designed for, is really to elicit emotions and to use those emotions to sharpen the relationships between the players. And then, now that we have these kind of like peaks, we can round them off and bring them more into focus and go, all right, it's 8 years later. Like, have we all been together? Have some of it, did two of us go off to the big city and come back? We have a lot of different ways that we have room to change the characters in significant ways and to make them more refined than they necessarily were at this, at this base level. And I think what I like about that is it's doing the rough sketch, right? So you're doing the rough sketch of the characters, and then you can start putting actual numbers into that equation and putting actual class abilities and really like drawing in the details of who the character is, and come back, and maybe the character, you only see the resemblance. It's not an exact copy of who it was. So Amy says, all my other games seem to be 4 to 8 week campaigns max. I'm looking forward to a real long campaign with a real story. I already had a plan for my character with the spell focus of the Mummer's Wagon. And I usually write out quite a bit of backstory for the character. So my expectation was that this game would take the place of my written backstory. All right, interesting. I think there's some room to explore with Amy's character in terms of, it's well established that she is pursuing a warlock type of path with her character, that she is somehow engaging with some eldritch force which is granting her powers and abilities. Whether that force is good or evil or multiple shades of gray, we'll find out. But I think the question that struck me this morning was, okay, she's got all these toys that are these little, spell foci type of power activation things. I'm curious, is this something that her parents have kept from her, that they also have this power? Have they been secretly imbuing these toys with some sort of infusion or whatever, or have they been establishing the connection with whatever mysterious, omnipotent or malevolent or eldritch benefactor is behind the scenes? That's one of those questions that I have. So Amy says, from the whole campaign, I'm looking forward to having relationships that can form conflict and then hopefully form stronger relationships. So that's, I think that's interesting. I was talking a little bit about how conflict can be a pitfall earlier, and how conflict works in terms of improv, even though classic improv teachers will beg you off of conflict. Don't play conflict scenes. And that's only useful when either you're roadblocking that. That's only useful advice when you're either roadblocking the action or there are no stakes. It's an arbitrary choice. You're fighting over something that doesn't actually have an outcome attached to it. So I think being in conflict and having a different idea than the other players is that's not fundamentally problematic. I think it's when that conflict either feels arbitrary or it roadblocks the rest of the party. That's where we fall into trouble, where it grinds the game to a halt. So that's something to consider. Yeah. So Havana points out, I like Amy and I's sister vibe. Bickering, but always making up and looking out for each other. A lot of mutual respect, but also both very stubborn. Yeah, I think I think one of the things that we need to flesh out as we continue is like, what's the bond that keeps this group together? Like, why are they friends? Why would they adventure together? Why do they care about each other so much? Right? That's ultimately like that's the heart of any like character development, is like, why do these two people care about them? If I know why they care about each other, then I have a reason to care about them. Then I'm invested in their relationship. And so I think that's something that I need to kind of take on too, in terms of, let's find a common reason for everybody to care about each other. You know, I mean, it was interesting to see that play out differently at the top of the session last night, where you walk in and the village is paralyzed, and half the group, the boys, were, let's go follow this trail of frost up into the mountains and lift the curse, and the sisters, if you will, were both like, let's go steal some money. So that's something to consider, right? Is that there was a moment there where the party was split in terms of what's our vested interest, and I think the sisters, if you want to put it that way, from this session anyhow, we're very much about like, how do I enrich myself personally, and both of the boys were, their initial impulse was, how do we protect the village? How do we save the innocent people? And I think that's, you know, that's an interesting distinction. It's certainly something that comes up in any adventuring group, so it's not unusual or anything like that. But it was one of those moments where we saw kind of like an abrasion, or the two groups kind of, not the two groups, but those two interests like come into conflict and bump up against each other. Ultimately, you know, the boys got bulldozered, but then the women paid for it, right? So that's right. Havana stole horses right off the top in order to help. That's also time-honored dungeoneering tradition, right? Is, I'm going to commit acts of larceny and murder in order to aid the greater good. So we were trying to prepare by having a bunch of gold. Yes, you're right, guys. No, you have the noblest of causes. I have no doubt that you had nothing but the best interest of the village at heart when you burned the mayor's house down. So there's that. All right. So, but I think that's something for me on my to-do list. Like, as I look at the campaign and look at the relationships as they're forming, and to look at those kinds of dynamics and go, okay, well, how do I bridge those things? How do I reward that quest for? How do I reward that quest for personal gain, you know, and material enrichment, and also play into the other, you know, the other dynamic of, we need to, you know, we're here to do something noble and selfless, right? So now I understand why I don't do DM recaps with all of my players. I'm getting machine gunned from all sides. I'm the DM. I'm on my own side. I'm on the side of the chat, and I'm here to provide them maximum enjoyment. And any other splash damage of fun that just happens to wash over any of the players, that's just a bonus. So, Amy says, one thing I didn't roleplay as much was the grooming OCD perfection thing. Yes. So, just to be clear, this is something that I had brought up earlier, but you were not in, is this Adventurers League. We're not going to play straight up, like, pure Adventurers League. I'm not bound by those rules, and I think, you know, we're going to have some rewards for the chat to participate in the game, and that inherently breaks the Adventurers League code. You know, it makes it illegal. So we're not going to play straight up by the book Adventurers League, which is fine. Like, I'm happy with that. So we can use other character classes, other races. We can hack, modify things, etc. So however you want to, you know, if you want to play something that's in like a beta playtest that you find online or whatever, that's that. We are playing in the Forgotten Realms, so I will try to provide you with a world map. That is something that's actually on my to-do list for prep. So one of the things that was interesting, I guess I have a question for Amy here, because Amy says, I want some cool world building stuff. And I guess my question is, do you as the player want to have input into how the world building stuff, like, do you want to help with the world building? Do you want to help define NPCs and organizations and places on the map and that sort of stuff? Or do you want to have those props available to you so that you can consume the lore and dig into what's going on and really kind of like integrate your character with the story of the world? Amy wants to help. Amy wants to help. Very good. Very good. Well, Amy, I may let you in on some of the secrets then of what's going on behind the scenes. We can certainly talk online about the village of Oakhurst, because it is in the book, but there's no map of it. It's not very well defined. It says kind of what the general location is, etc. But let me throw this question at our players, since we have them in chat, which is, I know in previous seasons you've sort of been tied to one location, and you didn't feel like you could necessarily get away or go out and explore the greater world and things like that. And I think, especially with this set of adventures, there's a lot of opportunities to maybe go different places around the world. But that means that if you spend a lot of time like developing Oakhurst and creating this vibrant little community that has all these named NPCs and things like that, that when you go away, that information sort of like goes into cold storage, right? It doesn't actually, it doesn't bear a lot of ongoing fruit. So I'm ambivalent about it. Like, I can find ways to stay in the vicinity of Oakhurst and yet still, you know, maybe there's a magical portal that transports, you know, that steps you to the next dungeon or whatever, or maybe there's some sort of book that you read that when you read it, it takes you there, da 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 da. So, I guess I'm willing to give you the opportunity to either move. We can move the game around a lot, or we can kind of like do the classic, like, you throw the rock in the pond and it starts with a little ripple, and it ripples further out and further out and further out. And so as you leave hometown, you go to another place, and then that blossoms, and you explore that, and then it blossoms into another place, etc. So. So Garav says, I want to explore, but I also want Oakhurst, or wherever we call home, to be a meaningful place to come back to. Yeah. So I think one of the things that I know, let's put it this way. So I don't want to repeat storylines that we've already explored in other campaigns, right? So in the Lost Brigade, obviously, like, we had a thing where the city was under siege, and you know, and we had a bunch of time jumps and things like that, and you felt very tied to that location, and that, you know, the location's been threatened and things like that. So I don't want. I mean, that's a great concept, and I don't necessarily disagree with it, but I also don't want to replay it for you guys, since you've already played through that just, you know, recently. So I want you to think about that too. But let's do a thing. Let's do a thing where we kind of develop Oakhurst a little bit. I'm almost wondering, since we're right at the start of the campaign, if we shouldn't like find space to like put a wiki together, and we could all kind of like put in notes about what's happened, about plotline, but also about location and things like that. Like do that's some sort of have a collaborative workspace where we could do world building and have it all be documented together, right? Because I don't think, we have a Slack channel, but I don't think that's the ideal place to do this sort of development and whatnot. So, yeah, Havana says, I want to get out with my parents gone. I don't have a lot of time either except for you guys. So that's also, again, that's where we kind of like have to find it. Oakhurst is meaningful for some. Is it meaningful for everyone? So, all right. Well, we'll work on getting a collaborative workspace together so that you can contribute as much or as little as you want to fleshing out the world. I am by no means a Forgotten Realms expert. As I think it was James V said, like the Sword Coast Adventurers Guide is a good resource. There's another resource that came out before 5e came out. Let me see if I can find it. There was a book that it's like Ed Greenwood's Guide to the Forgotten Realms or something like that. Let me see if I can find it. Ed Greenwood presents Elminster's Forgotten Realms. Let's take a look. It's just, where is it? It is $34. And so this book, it's 160 pages. It's a little bit light. I'm going to drop this into chat for you. Where's my... Repeat. So that's a book that is Ed Greenwood's presents Elminster's Forgotten Realms. There's no game mechanics in it, right? It is strictly kind of descriptions of places and things like that. That's my understanding. I don't actually own a copy of this book, so maybe I'll pull that one down and get it for you guys too. So that we all kind of can work from the same sort of reference type of material. But that's one of the things that they put out before 5e came out, when it was clearly like they were priming the pump for, well, guys, guess what's going on? This is going to be the next book. So that and the Sword Coast Adventurers Guide are two that you think about. But yeah, as James says, it contains lore and history. And I'm not, like I said, I'm not an expert, and I'm not tied to playing canonical Forgotten Realms. I love incorporating new ideas and blowing them up. So keep that in mind, that I'm not beholden to Forgotten Realms canon either. There is sort of a long, ongoing timeline that's being established of like the cult of the dragon rose up and then was put down by various groups of adventurers, and then there was a cult of elemental evil which also started to become ascendant, and they were also put down by various groups of adventurers. There was an event that happened in the Underdark that involved unleashing terrible demons upon the Underdark, and that was put down through various forces, and then it comes back to the giants, So that as James V points out, the Forgotten Realms have been through several reboots. Officially, canonically, has been through several reboots. So we have ample opportunity and motive to tinker with it all we like. So that's all right. Guys, it's 3:07. We've been gabbing for an hour here. I would like to tackle some of the things on my list, so I'm gonna kick you guys out. But I like where we are. I thought it was a very successful session. I like hearing what you guys, what your perceptions were of the thing. I couldn't have asked for anything better in terms of like how it went and how it turned out, and I was very happy with how the session turned out. But I'm going to ask you guys to pop out so that I can talk with the rest of the chat about things that are coming up, so I can kind of rock and roll on the rest of my to-do list. So, boo-hoo, boo-hoo. I'll have to ask you to step back, and we'll pick up the rest of this on our own private Slack channel and figure out how we're going to do that. So thanks for stopping in, though. Amy's like, I'm not going to listen to the whole thing. All right, you know, good luck to you. That's fine. You can, who's gonna stand in Amy's way? Who's a mod here? Who can put Amy on timeout? So. All right, so yes, all right. Dom can ban Amy. Perfect. All right. Either way, whatever. Amy, go pet your new dog for a little bit. Give Irving some love for me. All right. Thank you. All right. So, we've talked about some of these things already. I'm just going to burn through them very quick. The character bonds worked great. I was really happy with those. I don't really have anything to add about that. Like I said, what's on the page betrays how much depth and richness you can actually get out of sitting around the table and figuring out how those vague things in the bonds actually relate to each other and watching them play out and play out and connect with the characters. I think one of the challenges, as I mentioned, is to keep those bonds fresh and to keep them alive and living through the first, 4, 5, 6 sessions of the game. So that's that. Competency. I just wanted to reiterate that last night's game, I rewatched the VOD, and there was a lot of commentary about like, oh boy, they're really like, there's a lot of crit fails and there's a lot of fumbles and it's deliberately that way. Right, and I think one of the things that was really rewarding and interesting to me was there were no hit points in last night's game. Right, there wasn't even technically a combat. They never drew a sword and fought a monster, and yet I felt that 85–90% of the session was completely engaging and had stakes, and people felt like things were real and they're overwhelmed. And so it was really rewarding to me to play a rules-light system like Wildlings and have it go so smoothly. I had, honestly, so little prep attached to that game that it was a revelation to me in terms of how much we got out of it, right? How well it played out. And also your ability to just play these big, fantastic scenarios of, like, the snowflakes come down and they're, 4 inches in diameter and they've got runes in them instead of having crystal in them, that sort of stuff. Like those sorts of magical touches that you would feel weird about including in a D&D game without having to write some sort of disclaimer paragraph of like, well, these are actually glyphs of warding and they can only be activated once, right? It's true. You did watch the prep, so you know some of this stuff. You know how little prep I had behind it. But it was deliberately skewed for a low level of competency, and I think you have to play it that way. If anything, there was a little bit too much competency on the part of Amy's character where she was too good at magic. I had a feeling she was going to put her D12 in magic, and that meant that she succeeded a ton of the time. But I also, because the system is very loosey-goosey and interpretive, I had the opportunity to put my own spin on that. So even though she's successfully healing this guy, there's this very morbid overtone of like, oh, he sweats black, oily blood, and it drips down onto the, it spatters onto the crisp fall leaves and things like that. So that session 0 was designed to get the players in trouble in order to heighten the stakes on the relationships and the emotions. Somebody made the comment like, I don't know if I could play a whole campaign like this. It's not designed for a whole campaign. I think you could with some adaptation, but you'd have to like let people gradually like improve, like, okay, their unicorn die is going to step up from a D6 to a D8, etc., etc., etc. A system that you might look at that's has a similar model is the Cortex Prime system that's on Kickstarter right now. My buddy Cam Banks is publishing that, and it also has the idea of you have different sized dice, and you form in that case you form a dice pool, and and you can improve dice, etc. So that's something. So that's all I really want to say about the competency, right? Threads to watch. We have a few things that we need to pay attention to. Like one of them, like I said, is like Amy's parents. Who are those people? Like, what are they involved in? So Tack has access to these magical abilities, but is it something that's manifesting just for Tack? Is there something kind of more far-reaching going on here, overarching happening? That's something to watch. I think we've got to bring back Gregory, the mayor's son. You know that he was such a target of hostility and injury and offense that he's got to play a bigger role. It's something that I call the fiasco rule of plot development, which is whoever you shit on the worst is the person who comes back to bite you the hardest, right? So that's something to think about. What are the threads to watch? We should take a look at Havana's character, and she's very isolated, right? She's an orphan. She feels like an outcast. Her parents went... I don't think they're dead. I don't think we've definitively decided that they're dead, but where did they go? What happened to them? All right, so just to spin off on that for a brief moment, the basic idea behind Ironkeep Chronicles is that the keep itself is a magical keep, and it has all of these extra dimensional wings attached to it, right? That were constructed by various lords of the keep over the course of its existence. But unless you have the proper key for that area or that wing, you can't access it, right? So using a key opens up that wing, and if you're the bearer of that key, you can go in, or let it be established so that other people can go in, etc., 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 right? So that's that's something to keep in mind, is with this opportunity to really expand the Iron Keep in a bunch of really interesting ways. What if her parents were somehow either absorbed into the keep, or one of them was a lord and went into their own wing, but then closed it off? Maybe they've sequestered themselves and they've come out. Like that's a thread that could really tie her story into the Iron Keep more closely, if not being tied into Oakhurst itself, right? Because she, from what she said here, she doesn't feel a very good or a very close connection with Oakhurst itself. She's like, get me out of this podunk town. As BSB Care points out, what if they were one of the key holders? So one of the premises that I have for this, and I think I mentioned this on Tuesday, is that the party goes around and retrieves the keys from the dead key holders and then opens up different areas of the keep. So that's something to consider. Other threads to watch. You know, Eric's character is the goody two-shoes who still manages to get himself in trouble. He seems like a very gallant character, but he has some sort of, I don't know if it's naivety or blind spots or whatever. That's something to watch. I don't know if there's anything else off the top of my head. I think, you know, what are we going to do with Amy's magic? How is that going to play out? What sort of entity is behind that? Is it malevolent? It certainly seems so, right, from the initial outset. And is that too on the nose? Is it too alienating for the rest of the party? If you have Eric's character playing a paladin and she is essentially a warlock in league with explicitly dark and malevolent forces, then that gets problematic, right? That becomes a source of tension that's hard to resolve between those two specific characters. So we might want to, I think Amy would still find it gratifying if that character if that patron, instead of being a dark and malevolent one, was more of a trickster figure, right? More of a god of mischief, or at least a figure bent on a little bit of benign chaos rather than chaotic evil kind of maliciousness. So let's think about that. Infamous King Cupcake says, maybe if they grew up together with malevolent forces, it's adapted itself to her and the group around her. Yeah, Flockwell says, a friendly black goo that reminds me of Venom, right? The Spider-Man suit. That storyline is so iconic. I'm really tempted to kind of like tweak this so that it takes on a more benign aspect to it, because the rest of the party is so creeped out by it. Like if you will go back and watch the VOD, all three of them are like, why are you doing this? Like, I don't get it. I think I really had a lot of fun with it last night, so it's hard for me to dispense with that idea, but I love the idea of the different toys. But I wonder if it had a little bit more of a whimsical edge to it, then it wouldn't be quite as much of, it wouldn't draw such a stark contrast between her and sort of the quote-unquote good characters, right? So that's, keep in mind that Venom actually, the Venom suit was something that Spider-Man got in the Secret Wars, and it was kind of a boon to him to begin with, and it was only once it started feeding on him, and then it went off and attached itself to whatever, you know, Brock Sampson or whoever the character was, the astronaut guy, that he really became full-on more of an evil, malevolent force. So those are some things, some threads for us to watch. Just to quickly wrap up here, the to-do list for my prep is, all right, let's develop the, let's develop Oakhurst and the community and like the surroundings and get a map going of what it looks like and what's nearby, and we've got an idea of how far away the Iron Keep is and that sort of thing. So that's one thing. Tie in the Sunless Citadel into what's going on here. Yeah, I think of Oberon the Faking. I also think of like the Native American, you know, coyote trickster figure is also very much a classic piece of mythology, which occurs throughout mythology around the globe. So those are things. Yeah, so Tuesday I mentioned the word Tarrasque. So I did actually get to that point on Tuesday, and what I meant with that point was the whole tower defense concept, where maybe they get into the Iron Keep and they sort of establish domain or ownership of it, but then some sort of recurring force keeps coming back and attacking and trying to get something out of the keep. They keep having to defend it. So that was that story arc where I talked about they go, they explore the dungeon, they go and they get some treasure and they get some magical weapons and things like that, and then when they come back to the keep, you know, it's that tick, tick, tick countdown. Every new moon, something is going to come and attack. What's it going to be this time? What's going to be this time? Is it going to be a horde of things? Is it going to be a single boss that flies down out of the night? That sort of thing. Like that's the Tarrasque concept, is like on the reg, we do the adventure arc of go out in the world and explore, but then it always comes back to the keep and having to hold the keep and defend it against whatever forces of greed or malevolence want to take it over. So that's something that I think is an ongoing thing we can consider. We don't have to establish that right out of the gate, right? Yeah, it could be a Loki-esque character. I don't necessarily want it to be a god. I want it to be maybe something that's powerful, but seems like maybe it could be confronted or contained or defeated. It's very tricky when you have gods directly interfering or interposing themselves in the campaign, because players don't feel like they can do anything against a god. But if you go, oh, it's a very powerful demon, they go, okay, well, there's still going to be stats and parameters around that very powerful demon. Like, I could find a high enough level wizard. If it has stats, I can kill it. I could find a high enough level wizard to trap it, somehow coerce it into letting me go or whatever it is. So that's something to think about. So I want to develop Oakhurst. I want to develop who's there. Specifically, I want to come back to the mayor's son, maybe what happened to the mayor and his wife. Are they still alive 8 years later? Is there a new mayor and his wife? What's going on with Amy's parents? How the whole, foster child adoption scenario is going between Avril and Grayson, and I don't know. We could ask the players, did any sort of love triangle ever evolve, or were there any sort of romantic relationships that went well, or soured, or got abandoned, or are unrequited, or whatever it is. So that's the that's something that's maybe worth asking about, right? Is where have the characters been, and have they had any entanglements in their relationships? Have they had have they tripped up at all? Have they abandoned each other at all? Are they in touch, not in touch? Gone to see the world and come back, never left, loved it here, that sort of thing. So I want to develop Oakhurst. I want to develop the NPCs and relationships in Oakhurst. I want to define a little bit more of the surrounding area. I need to draw a map of the Ironkeep. I need to have an idea of what the base set, the starter set of the Ironkeep looks like, and then give them the room to see, okay, well, this is now you can just magically add on this whole other piece of the structure that you. So I gesture too much, I get too far off the screen. So you can add on whole new pieces of the structure and unlock new areas and essentially explore in place, as it were. And that's where we have this idea of you could incorporate magical portals that might lead you to different locations throughout the realms. So we could make the Ironkeep part of a nexus of travel gateways or other keeps that float around the realms, essentially sort of teleportation circles. Or it could be something as simple as the keep itself might have those dungeons directly attached, right? So you might go through a door and then fall into the Lost Shrine of Tomoe-chan, which is actually part of the structure and is not, you don't travel to it. It's like you open the door and fall in, and then the door closes behind you, and you have to find your way out, and then it would deposit you back into the courtyard of the Ironkeep. So that's something that is also possible. It's like we can do a lot of because of the dungeon nature, we can just essentially bolt on those dungeons, right? So, yeah, I have some ideas. So let me we're a couple of people in the chat are saying, will Patreon backers get to make NPCs for use in the campaign, or maybe define some of the key holders? I am open to that. Let me give you some insight on what the key holders, how they're going to influence the game. So essentially what I would like to do is take those 9 canonical monsters that we used last night, the Minotaur, the Troll, the Unicorn, the Gargoyle, the Golden Owl. I'm not going to name them all, but take those 9 iconic monsters from Beastlings last night and translate each of them into a different key holder, a different Lord of the Keep, right? And then what I'm going to do is have those Lords of the Keep be influential, they're going to kind of cycle through and become ascendant, dominant, and then diminishing throughout the course of the game. So that when we sit down to play, if the Gargoyle is the dominant Lord of the Keep and the Troll is ascendant, well, maybe the Troll grants +2 on rolls related to its portfolio. The Gargoyle, you may be able to make those rolls at advantage. And then in the diminishing one, you'd have a -2. So if it was the Unicorn, you'd have a -2 on initiative, dex checks, dex saves, that sort of stuff, right? And then those those lords will sort of rotate through. And actually, I've got an idea that you people in the chat, through donations or what have you, may be able to rotate, maybe once an hour those lords around, so that we're not just stuck on the same one for the whole session. But you still it would be an hour of game time. You'd still have to live through that for, or deal with that situation or benefit from that situation for an hour. But then, then if chat deigns that it's time for it to move on, through escalating donations or whatever, it would wax and wane like the constellations. So those things are going to play in. I don't know if the players will pick up on it directly. They probably will at some point, like figure it out. But I like the idea that there's named characters who are tied to those beasts, and that there's just sort of like a reflection, a worldly reflection of what was established in the prequel with what's continuing to happen now that we've gotten into the D&D part of the campaign. So that's I need to name those people. I also have to make some decisions about, like, okay, it would be great to have an idea of like what these areas were like and that sort of thing. So I'm willing to outsource some of those things to people in chat if you guys have if you have a fire in your belly to take that on and give kind of a logline overview of the area, and maybe either just do little thumbnail sketches of like, here's the basic premise of this Lord's wing within the keep, and here are some key features, and here are some key chambers or whatever, and kind of like just do a light treatment on that, and then I would take that and adjust, adapt, embellish it however it might be. I'm happy to figure out a way to like kick that stuff over to Dom and kick it up to you guys. I'd love to share that. I will caution you that like my experience with chumming stuff out for the Patreon backers is it's like James V and BSB Care, and nobody else really chimes in. So I'm trying to keep the Patreon backer stuff very simple, right? I'm trying to keep it contained so that it's not, you guys aren't, so when Patreon backers read this, they go, oh, this is a lot of work, I don't want to do this. So one of the other ideas that I'm tinkering with, like, I don't want to lean on you guys too heavily, and I also don't want to have expectations that you're going to do a ton of world building that then I either would like decide, well, that doesn't really mesh with my vision, I want to adjust this, or it just doesn't happen and I'm like, oh, now I'm under the gun, I got to make up a bunch of stuff. So I'd like to know what my workload is. Like, I'd like to manage my workload in terms of like what sort of stuff I have to create. But some of the things that we're talking about are high enough level concept that it's something that can easily be shared. On a more granular level, one of the things I'm kicking around is having the opportunity for chat to kick into gear like a critical hit deck or a critical fumble deck. And I would make the cards for, so when they roll a nat 20, it's not just a normal critical hit where you roll the double damage, but it would be, okay, pull a card from the deck, and not only do they do double damage, but they are knocked prone, or they sent flying 10 feet, or they are blinded for 1 round, or the standard stuff that you find in a critical hit deck. But I would customize it a little bit more for how I would want it to play out. But what I've talked with Dom about is that some of the Patreon backers can add a card to the deck of their own devising, and I would obviously have final say over what the exact effect and how much bonus damage or whatever it would be. But you could add your card to the deck and name the effect, like here's what the effect is or whatever, right? So I think each of these cards would have some sort of, Volagar's volatile vexation or something like that. You twist the guy's, you twist the guy's arm so hard that it snaps in its socket, and he's -2 on all melee weapon attacks for the rest of the combat or whatever it is. So, yeah. So there's a ton of opportunities there. I don't know if I would extend the range where a 2 to 3 and an 18 to 19 would be crit fumbles and critical hits, but it would be a bonus on top of when you roll an at 20. What it would be is like if we reach a certain donation level for the night, the critical hit deck comes into play, and from then on, whenever you crit, you draw from the deck. So I will I will talk to Dom about this in a little more detail, and I will have more ideas for you on Tuesday, because we're going to kind of, like, the way this is designed is like we're going to slowly ramp our way up. But if there is something that, like, specifically you want to tackle, as a Patreon backer, you can go in and look at the sheet of the character sheet for Beastlings, and you can look at the 9 iconic monsters that define the skill buckets. And if that inspires you to do a little write-up on one of the previous lords of the Iron Keep, that's fine by me. There's somewhere at the bottom of this, there is the master mage who created the whole thing, but I think we have plenty of room to have varied and interesting lords of the keep, and I would like to tie them to the domain, the various domains of the skill buckets that we established in Beastlings. So it'd be interesting to see, like, what is the lord like who has the Djinn bucket of charm, deceive, affix a price? Like, is he a merchant? Is he a gambler? Like, what is that guy like? So we've gone an hour and a half. That's as much as I'm able to crank out today. I have some other things that I need to take care of, and I have some things on my to-do list, huh? So I think it was fun to have everybody kind of come in and pitch in. That kind of got us a little OT. That's fine. We started a little bit late. Let's quick take a look. I did upload the calendar for this week. Let's take a look at what is going on. So tonight, it's Crit Juice at 8 o'clock. Mr. David Crennan. I think he's DMing. I'm not sure, to be honest. The Crit Juice crew is coming in to run their game at 8 o'clock tonight. Friday, it is Wild Cards. The Wild Wild West gets a little weirder. Check that out with Mr. Jordan Callerman, Caves Callerman, and the rest of the fine crew. Right? Is that who's DMing? Or is it Jordan Pridgeon? You guys correct me if I am wrong. I think it's Jordan Caves Callerman. So that's 8 o'clock on Friday. Saturday at 12:30, Phoenix Dawn Command. And then Sunday, catch us on the YouTubes. You do the thing that you guys do. And I will be back next Tuesday with more Disorganized play. I may be moving it up either earlier or later. I haven't 100% decided, but I'm going to start having a standing meeting, as I mentioned, on Tuesday. I'm going to start having a standing meeting on Tuesdays that's supposed to take place at 3:30 and probably go for an hour. So that means I would have to push this back probably till like 4:30 or 5 o'clock Pacific time and go from like 5 to 6, which is fine. That is fine. Jordan Caves Callerman is DMing Wild Cards, and Jordan Pridgeon is playing the Preacher. Teflon Neil Callerman. Very good. So, that's all I have got for you guys today. It's time for me to go take a delicious drink of Diet Mountain Dew and turn my AC back on. We're at the very beginning of this. Like I said, just to wrap up, like, I really love the cast. I really love what happened last night. I knew that we were going to have some distractions that, like when Amy started the whole "let's go get some gold" thing, I knew that it wasn't going to work. Like, it rapidly turned into a fiasco. It was designed to be that. That's fine. They learned a lesson off of that. And it, look, that whole thing with, like, Gregory would have never come around if they hadn't gone and done this, right? Gregory would have been like a tossed-off side character that they mentioned in passing, but it never would have become the thing where you broke his arm, his leg, and gave him a mild concussion, and then healed him through some sort of weird, dark, eldritch, necrotic magic, right? So that was all. That session 0 did everything that I wanted to accomplish, and if I could get away with playing that Beastlings variant every week, I would be tempted to do so. But I'm very happy with what we've got now going into, okay, well, let's make real characters and let's pencil in or put an ink pen to some of these details and actually put some concrete stats attached to them and give them some concrete abilities and figure out where are they 8 years later, how are they different, how are they the same. It was a great first session, and if you did not catch it, please go back and watch the VOD. There's about an hour and a half of explaining the rules and establishing the characters and things like that. But then the rest of the adventure, I thought played out in a very engaging and entertaining fashion. So, did they learn their lesson? Did they? I meant they learned their lesson as players, not as characters. So I think maybe they learned their lesson that they're not going to be good at stuff. Although that didn't stop Havana from picking up the little music box. That's another thing on my to-do list, is if that music box comes back, I need an actual, like, little music box. Time to fire up eBay and see what I can do. And what kind of... God, if I could get, like, a little wooden mummer's cart, you know, little wooden zoo type of... Oh, boy, that would be juice. And you know Amy would eat that up. Yeah, hit me up on Twitter if you guys have any ideas for that particular thing. I'm going to be stewing on that. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Yeah, we did have to wait for Amy and Irving to show up, but you know what? I'm a dog lover at heart, and it was her first night with him, and I knew that that was going to happen. But I'll kick the can down the road for Irving anytime. That's fine. So, there you go. Thanks again to Farquad for modding. Thanks for stepping up, FQ. Thanks to James V, BSB Care, all of our regulars and our Patreon backers. If you haven't backed, get on it, because there's opportunities for you to contribute. I think we've got some great stuff in store. I want to noodle it out, and if I can find ways for you to meaningfully contribute without overwhelming you or creating a bunch of extra work for me, I'm happy to share some of the burden here, because there's plenty of stuff for us to tackle. So, with that in mind, until next time, let's dungeon! 2 for 2! 2 for 2! Yes!